Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023 Fayetteville City Council meeting order. Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you for joining us, those who are joining us remote. Madam Deputy Clerk, do we have any council members that are remote?
The conference line is through the system today, so I can't see that.
Okay.
And I have not been informed of their arrival yet.
All right, sounds good. Item 2.0 is the invocation. If we could please stand for the prayer, we ask the council member DJ Hare if he would give us prayer.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and Happy New Year to everyone. Dear Lord Jesus, we first just want to say thank you, Father, for letting us enter into 2023. We applaud you, we salute you, and we thank you, Father. We thank you, Father, for our country. We thank you for our men and women that are fighting abroad. We thank you for our first responders. We continue to ask you, Father, to embrace them and hold them dearly as they go about doing their job, not only here in the city of Fayetteville, but across the country. Father, if I could, I'd like to do just a special prayer send out to join the rest of the world as we pray for a young man that is in need of prayer right now, and that is Mr. Help me, you all. Yes, Mr. Hamlet, the football player for Buffalo. Lord, we thank you for healing power. We know that prayers are going out all across the world for this young man, and we are just expecting a great recovery in Jesus' name. Father, we thank you for the meeting tonight. We thank you for the agenda that's set before us. We thank you, Lord, just for our citizens and all of our council members. We continue to ask you, Father, to help the council to move forward in 2023, help our great staff in 2023. And there's so much, Father, that we could just thank you for. But we want you to know that we acknowledge that we cannot do anything without you. You are our ultimate power, and we thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilmember Hare, and certainly prayers do go out to the young man mentioned in the prayer. Council, as we go to approval of the agenda, it's been brought to our attention that a number of council members will be away for training scheduled for the 23rd, which will cause a conflict. So if we could add item 4.06 as the reschedule of the 23rd meeting to the 25th, was that 26th, I think, was that Thursday, which was a alternative date. What we'll do after we hear the last printed agenda item, we'll ask for a motion to suspend the rules to officially make that effective. So if you could, at the beginning, if you could make a motion to add item 4.06, which is the reschedule of councilmember date. Councilmember Benavente?
I'd like to move that we amend the agenda to include item 4.06 to change our meeting date from the 23rd to the 26th of this month.
Okay. There's a motion by Councilmember Benavente, seconded by Councilmember Hondros. Any discussion on that motion? And I heard someone join us by phone. Is that Councilmember Ingram?
No, sir, she actually informed me that she's going to be unable to.
Okay. All right. So any discussion on the motion? Council, I'll look to you for your votes. Those in favor of adding the item 4.06? All right, Madam Clerk, that's unanimous by those voting. Moving into item 4.01, Fayetteville Police Department, how to establish community watch. Mr. Hewitt?
Ready for this one? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mayor Colvin and City Council members. I'm Specialist Sandra Everett Archery with the Crime Prevention Unit of the Fayetteville Police Department. And I'd just like to thank you all for the opportunity to share information about the importance of community watch groups in our city and how it relates to crime prevention. Some common terminology that we use is community watch group. It's a group of people living in the same area who want to make their neighborhood safer by taking ownership of the community. Sometimes they're called neighborhood watch groups, and they are an organized group of civilians devoted to crime and vandalism prevention. And crime prevention is comprising strategies and measures seeking to reduce the risk of crime occurring. And whether a group is called Community Watch or Neighborhood Watch, the ultimate goal is to achieve safer communities by working together with local law enforcement to reduce the risk of crime and improve their quality of life. The concept of crime prevention is to reduce the opportunity for crime to be committed. And criminals often look for easy targets or easy opportunities, and when that opportunity is reduced, the potential for crime decreases. Why are community watch groups so important? Groups create a sense of security. Whenever community watch groups create a sense of security, the information is shared by the Crime Prevention Unit on safety and security measures. A lot of times, it reduces the fear of crime in neighborhoods. Being a part of a community watch can be beneficial to citizens due to the increased awareness of the activity happening in the area, often resulting in reducing fear in the community. Having a community watch group also stimulates neighborhood awareness by neighbors looking out for one another. Bonding with your neighbor can provide a sense of comfort. And I often tell my groups to get to know those who are adjacent to you in your neighborhood, to look out for each other and to report activity that's happening in the neighborhood. It's also a good idea to pay attention to what seems to be normal in a neighborhood. You see something that just doesn't seem to be normal, it's good to pay attention and to report that activity. Community Watch creates organized action plans and goals. Whenever you identify plans and goals, it assists the groups with decreasing the risk of being the victim of a crime. They decrease the risk of becoming a crime victim. When citizens are self-empowered, they have a sense that they have the ability to change their circumstances. And community watch groups, they're not vigilantes, and we tell them that they should not be political in nature. The purpose of Community Watch. The group is managed, run, and operated by the community. The members of the community define the goals of the Community Watch. It's their group. The police department is just there to assist with their efforts. It's a way to reestablish ownership of your community. And when criminals see that you care about your community or your neighborhood, they're less likely to commit a crime. Community Watch is a partnership between law enforcement and the community to reduce crime risk. When crime prevention specialists attend meetings, they provide a detailed calls for service report indicating the incidents that were described in the area, which reduces misinformation and rumors being spread throughout the neighborhood. The group receives information about crime trends and safety tips in an effort to reduce crime. The specialist also provides information on upcoming city and other events to the group. Community Watch is a forum for training, support, and positive results. It's also a safe method to express crime concerns. The citizens can express their concerns without fear of retaliation. Community Watch is education about effective reporting procedures. Citizens are encouraged to report suspicious activity by calling 911. Sometimes citizens are not sure whether or not they should call 911. Whenever there is a community watch group, we stress to them the importance of calling 911 if they witness any suspicious activity. Anytime you need a patrol officer to respond, you are to call 911. The 6 Ps of Community Watch. Policing. Community policing programs contribute to establishing and reactivating community watch group partnerships. Proactive. Groups have transitioned from being the eyes and ears of the community to being more proactive in their efforts to support the department. Pride. Community watch groups incorporate activities that restore pride and unity to neighborhoods. Many groups participate in the annual National Night Out observance, enhancing relationships and bringing back a true sense of community. Potential. Watch groups create safer neighborhoods and reduce the potential fear of crime by improving the quality of life in the community. Partnerships. Partnerships are enhanced as they work with city government, law enforcement, and others in the community. And prevention. Community watch groups serve as the foundation of community-based crime prevention and are often a stepping stone to revitalizing the community. Partnership with the police department. The police department endorsement. The police department endorsement plays a critical role in the group's credibility. The department should be the major source of information on crime trends and crime prevention initiatives. It builds rapport and trust. Building trust between the members of the community and police personnel forms a working relationship and transparency that leads community members to eagerly provide information and assistance. The groups also receive crime prevention tips and training. The Crime Prevention Unit offers training and presentations on various crime prevention and safety topics to the group. And we also provide information about our Citizens Police Academy. The group receives information regarding the academy that's held twice a year for residents who are interested in knowledge about departmental operations. The academy provides hands-on experience to attendees about units within the department. And we provide information about the FPD mobile-friendly websites and our crime open data portal. Information regarding the department's mobile app and police open data portal are shared with the group. Both are tools available to assist citizens with accessing information on crime trends and incidents and are great ways to stay connected to department events. Information is shared regarding the department's social media platforms. We share information about our FPD Facebook page, our FPD Twitter, the Fayetteville PD Instagram, and our Next Door social media app. The slide you're looking at right now shows the total number of active community watch groups in the city. It provides the information. We have 165 total groups. They're broken down by our districts, Cross Creek, Central, and Campbellton. We have traditional groups. They are the residents that come together normally in a meeting setting. And our HOA are our homeowner association groups. They normally meet once or twice a year, but there are some HOAs that meet more often. And to be recognized as an active group by the Fayetteville Police Department, a group must meet at least once a year. Business watches are local businesses within a certain established boundary. And we also have virtual groups who are residents that meet virtually. What you're looking at now is the broken down by the council district. It provides the information on the number of groups that are in each city council district. If you'll notice, the red asterisks indicate that there is an overlap of city council members in that district. To form a community watch group, you will need a group of residents or citizens that are committed to starting the group, an initial plan. What are the goals for your group? Also, a list of any issues or concerns that you may want to express. A meeting agenda is necessary, and also the meeting location, but I will say that we have some groups that meet on the Zoom platform if you would like to meet on Zoom. And also we encourage our community watch groups to establish the boundaries and the streets that they want to be included in that group. And the sign-in sheet comes in handy because we can get information about the residents, their contact information, and we can keep in contact with them based on that information. We encourage community watch groups to select a coordinator to be the head of the group or to lead the group. Some people call them presidents, but we encourage them to have someone that is interested in leading the group. And there is access to a Community Watch Coordinator's Guide. The link is here, but it's on our website at faypd.com. And anyone that's interested in starting a Community Watch group, you can contact the Crime Prevention Unit at 433-1033, 1034, or 1134. Contact information for our Campbellton District. The district commander is Captain Ryan Manley. The specialists are myself and Ashley Sharon. Campbellton District is the northeast portion of the city. Central District would be the middle portion of the city, and the district commander for Central District is Captain Michael Petty. The specialists are Sharon Stevens and Antoine Rogers. Cross Creek District would be the district that is on the western portion of the city, and the district commander is Captain Sean Streepay. The specialists are Marissa Ione and Marina Sullivan. The Fayetteville Police Department is committed to strengthening police and community partnerships through the conception of community watch groups. These groups are the foundation of improvement in the overall safety of the neighborhoods in which they are formed. It takes a team to effectively fight crime, and the Crime Prevention Unit looks forward to assisting communities in forming new groups and achieving success in their crime reduction endeavors. And we often say that crime prevention is a shared responsibility. Are there any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Ms. Archer. Councilmember Hare.
First, let me just applaud our crime prevention team. You all do a very, very good job, and I'm always glad to see you all at our meetings. You do very, very well, and thank you for what you do. You did not put a number, and it may not be a number, on how many citizens are needed to start a community watch group. Is there any particular number that's needed where the city will support?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a particular number needed, but I would say at least a few people. I wouldn't put a number on it. We have some groups, that meet. There are only a couple of people that meet, but they're concerned about their neighborhood. So I wouldn't put a number on it. Anybody that's concerned about, their neighborhood and they want to, do something, to change that, they can start a community watch group.
And they do not have to fall up under any type of nonprofit status or anything along that line, just in order for them to receive, for example, to do our micro safety grants and any other type of grant that the city may have. They don't have to be they can just be an organized group that's listed through the city. They need to be an organized group. They need to be an organized group and recognized as a community watch group. Okay. The last thing that one of the last things that you stated, and it's always important that we echo that out to our citizens, that whenever our citizens are the ones that know, as you stated, what's suspicious in the neighborhood. They know it better than the police department, and we're asking them to call 911. But some of the concerns that always pop up, I don't want to tell them where I live, and on and on and on like that. I don't want to tell them my name. And we always tell them around this diocese that, and you all, that they can remain anonymous.
Yes.
If you can just echo that.
They can remain anonymous, and we do have, people that want to remain anonymous. Some fear retaliation, so we often tell them that you can remain anonymous. Just give us as much information as you can, and you can remain anonymous.
And my last question, I know that we're now in our second phase of the micro safety grants. So just tell, if you could, the council, but of course citizens that are listening, just how supportive that has been in helping to curtail crime.
We've had a lot of groups that have received the micro safety grants. Unfortunately, none of my groups applied for it, but we have
District
had a
4
lot.
has.
We have had a lot of groups that have applied and received
Yes,
the
ma'am.
grants.
Yes, ma'am.
And they're using them for different things as far as, safety in the community. I think Massey Hill, they have some sort of mentorship for the kids or whatever, some kind of cooking class for young people, for the kids or whatever. And so we do have quite a few of them that have utilized the micro safety grants.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Sir, council, any other questions? All right, well, thank you. Keep up the good
Thank
work.
you again for the opportunity, and y'all have a blessed evening.
All right, you as well. Thank you. Council, moving to item 4.02, criminal enforcement of ordinances. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Lachelle Pulliam, Assistant City Attorney, and this evening I will be presenting on criminal enforcement of ordinances. Typically, code enforcement or ordinance enforcement is a civil process. However, the law does provide for criminal enforcement of ordinances. For example, the city attorney's office, before the law changed, would typically take our more serious solid waste cases to environmental court or e-court. It's a criminal court where we, bring defendants in to get their attention and get their hopeful compliance with the ordinance. But since the law has changed, in order for us to continue to do that and enforce other ordinances, the council will need to take some action. And so before we go into the changes, I would like to bring to council's attention a provision of the North Carolina State Constitution. And this provision, it's generally called the clear proceeds provision. It requires all funds that are collected in connection with criminal cases to be remitted to the county for public schools. So should council choose to criminally enforce ordinances, council would, the city will be required to turn any recovered funds over to the county. This shows the changes to the law. So before December 1st, 2021, generally all ordinance violations were considered Class 3 misdemeanors. And so after the new law, now there are some ordinances that cannot be enforced criminally. And those are provided to you in your CCAM. Also, in your CCAM, there are the new statutory defenses. So provided council chose to enforce criminally and we did get into criminal court, there are now statutory defenses available to the defendants that would further prevent guilty pleas in these cases. And again, the clear proceeds, in both scenarios would apply. The second one under the second column is basically saying that if council would like to criminally enforce certain ordinances that are allowed under the law, then council must pass an ordinance specifying for each particular ordinance that it will be criminally enforced. So next steps would be for council to decide, will the city enforce ordinances criminally? Will the city only enforce those that are allowed under the law, or would the city enforce ordinances that are allowed but we don't already have the specificity? Then we would need to decide which ones we wanted to enforce criminally and then make the applicable ordinance amendments. And that is my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Do have a couple. I have one, and then I'll go to Councilman Behair. So if I'm understanding it correct, those that are in gray are no longer enforceable, period, whether
That
the
is
city
correct.
adopts it or not. Okay. And so the General Assembly took care of that. The other ones you were saying would have to have an item-by-item adoption.
Yes, sir. And the only exception to that, the point about what is in gray, is the UDO. So generally, the UDO is not enforceable criminally. However, if it pertains to unsafe buildings, then the city still has the authority to enforce criminally. So, for example, we do still take to environmental court those cases where people do construction without permits.
Okay. Now, there was one in here, reference to, let's see where it is. There was substantial fines for the first, second, and third offense for fair housing provision. Okay, so if I'm understanding this is one of the allowable ordinances if the council adopts it. The first civil action is $11,000 penalty if there's no prior discriminatory practices. Next one is a $27,000 penalty, and the next one's a $55,000 penalty if there's another violation. So who determines when a violation has occurred? Is this something that has to be adjudicated through the courts, or is this a decision made in the city attorney's office?
If I'm not mistaken, it's within our Human Relations Department.
So that board would determine if discrimination took place, whether it was for whatever reason, not just racial, but gender or anything else. And then these fines are assessed without coming to the city council or without going to the attorney's office? Because these are appointed board members, so how do they have the legal acumen to make that decision?
It's actually, I'm sorry, Mayor. It is actually the staff that investigates and determines if violations have occurred, and those are the maximum penalties. That is not the penalty in and of itself, but the maximum penalty.
Okay? All
Does
right.
that answer your question?
That does. All right. Councilmember here?
Thank you, Mayor. So I understood about the UDO. So you're saying that none of the the ordinances and policies that fall within the UDO, there's nothing that can, if the UDO issues are violated, whatever it is, and wherever it is, the enforcement of it comes from where then? What is the ultimate enforcement in getting things done? Because that's a lot of what citizens hope for, not so much going to court, but as far as cleaning up their communities or violators in their neighborhoods. I know that we can do some fining. So what can they do if it's an issue that becomes major?
Yes, sir. So under the state law, we are no longer allowed to enforce criminally unless it relates to an unsafe building. Mm-hmm. However, we do still have, as you mentioned, civil options, and those include things like stop work orders, civil penalties or fines. We call them civil penalties, as fines are generally criminal. We also could, if it's severe enough, bring up civil action for an order to abate, which would, we'd request for the court to give us an order, either requiring the person to fix the issue or allowing us to fix the issue. So
as of what we have right now, this is where we've been all the while.
No, sir. So these changes are effective as of December 1st. So before that, we could and we did.
Okay. Well, look like we're going to have some concerns as we move forward. We hope not, but unless we do it individually.
Well, with respect to the UDO, we don't have an option there. That is one of the ones where we are prohibited from enforcing criminally.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Sir.
Councilmember Hondros and then Benavente.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So reviewing this and looking at our options and considering them, if I'm understanding this correctly, so it's one or the other, right? If we choose to change the ordinance, or revise ordinances so that we can go after them criminally, then any monetary penalties collected would go to the county instead of the city. Is that right?
That is correct.
So we either keep the civil penalties where the city can collect them, or we change the ordinance, revise the ordinances, and then we can go after them criminally, but then we don't get any of the monetary penalties. right?
That is correct.
Just making sure I was understanding that correctly.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Benavente?
Oh, it's probably worth noting, though, that we're trying to prevent certain negative behaviors, not just make money off of people. So whether it goes to the city or the county, I don't think should be a bearing decision-making factor here. I did want to ask, is there a way that we can do a review of the ordinances in white and say how many of them historically we've gone after criminally? Because certainly if there are certain ones that we don't typically have issues with, there may not be a need to make those adjustments. So I'd want maybe that information before we start going line by line and making them all criminal again.
We certainly can get that information for you.
That'd be something I look forward to in a motion at some point, sir.
So, any other questions? Councilmember Banks McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, for these residents and business owners, before they're being penalized or criminalized, are they receiving a warning before we move forward?
Yes, ma'am. So generally, we give them, we call them NOVs or notices of violation. It's essentially the warning letter. It says, dear owner or resident, you are in violation of this section of the code because you have done X. Please do Y by this date. And then it provides a contact information with the inspector's information on there. And then sometimes they even get a second NOV or a second warning letter, but generally after the compliance period ends, they are issued a citation with a civil penalty.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure, because some people may not be aware of the ordinance and things of that nature, but then we also want to go after those who are considered repeated offenders. So.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And just to, if I may add, counsel, generally, when we give those NOVs, as Ms. Pulliam said, if they call us and say, hey, I got this notice of violation, I need a little more time, the inspectors work with them and give them more time. And so, again, going back to Councilmember Benavente's comment, our interest is in compliance and not having to take legal action to assess penalties or threat of criminal prosecution.
All right, Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Pulliam, per our conversation that we had over the weekend, let me have some clarity. Legislation will not allow us to process criminally at all, correct? And if we do it individually by ordinances, how many ordinances do we would have to do if we wanted to, line by line?
So it's not that all ordinances are no longer criminally enforced. There's a finite list that.
The list that you gave us has 30 ordinances in white.
Well,
not-
so the finite list that I'm referring to is in the statute. That's in the 168. But regarding your question on the ordinances, yes, sir. I have 5 pages of, and these are, these are the ones that are, they're not all of our ordinances, but these are, the ones where it either already says that it will be a misdemeanor or where we have typically taken it to environmental court, or where it could otherwise be enforced. So I'd have to count these, but
Thank you very much. I got my point across. Thank you.
Just to follow up, I guess, at some point you'll bring this back for the individual adoption and modification. So the ones that the council has to adopt in order to do it can be modified. For instance, I see one on here for noise for radios and tape players and loudspeakers. I don't see one like for the loud car mufflers and stuff like that. So how do we, if they choose to do it, as council votes on this, it has an opportunity to modify it or update it? Is that what?
Well, it would, as a part of the ordinance amendment process, council certainly could make any, changes to the ordinance.
Okay. All right. Council, any other questions? Councilman Hondros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if this would be best, maybe put in committee, the Housing Ordinance UDO committee, to let those members work with staff on possible revisions?
Well, some are pertaining to housing. I think because this is, if I'm understanding the statute, change the part of where council has to specifically adopt those
That's right.
that it wants to enforce. So some of it's housing, some of it's not. I know we're in the process, and we had some committees upcoming that would come together. I think this is going to take a broader conversation. So what is the city attorney's plan to bring this back for the ones that you're proposing adoption, so that we can kind of go through them strategically? Because, you know, this is an important change, since we have to now vote on them. Because what you're saying, until we vote on them because of the statutory change, they're not enforceable?
Not criminally.
Okay. All right.
And so
what's
the point of the
what's
presentation was to get direction from council as to how you wanted to proceed.
So we need to start going line by line tonight, is that what you're saying? When are you looking for adoption of these amended ordinances, or these current ones?
It is up to the council. I think the point here is that, again, unless council takes specific action, we cannot enforce these ordinances criminally.
Mayor Cole, I have a motion on whenever it's appropriate.
All right. Well, Council, I hope that, you know, because this is such a broad brush, I'd like to kind of spend a little time with that. So I guess in your motion, I hope that it would be for us to either go through these at some point. The work session is the venue for that, because at a council meeting, it's a little tough to do that. So I'll look to you for your pleasure before I go to you for whatever motion. Councilman Harry, you had a...
Yes, sir, I was just wondering, and that wasn't done tonight, but is it something that you all in our legal can tell us or help guide us on those that either we were able to at one time since December, or ones that lean more that direction for any kind of legal action, instead of us going ordinance by ordinance, unless we're going to, as stated, do it in a committee? Could you all help us from that perspective?
There's some commentary, sir, excuse me, that the legislative intent behind it was to get the governing bodies, for lack of a better term, stamp of approval on what would be enforced and what would not. We certainly have the information regarding the most frequently, types of ordinances that we typically enforce in the city attorney's office.
And I think that's step one right there. We need a lot more information based on these 30 in white. Which one do we even pursue criminally?
Right.
So let's get that information back, and I think we can move to step 2 after that point. So Mayor Colvin.
That was my
I think,
concern.
just to clarify, I think what I heard you say was the ones that are,
I'm coming,
that we
Councilman.
pursue the most, because
Right.
we pursue these now in environmental court, which is a criminal court. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, let me just make a point here. We've had these information since Wednesday. I reviewed the information and had a phone call with Ms. Pulliam on all the disagreements that I had pertaining to this. If we had any issues or concerns, I think that was the time to do it, so we can either approve not to enforce these 30 items that we have on here and move forward if we had additional ordinances that we wanted to review individually. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was the essence of this presentation.
Well, good point. I think two things. One is, council, whatever we pass is going to be the law of the land until it's changed. So whether it's common or whether it's uncommon, I mean, circumstances come up that we can't foresee. I do think that even though we had this, at some point we're going to have to go down individually to these and deal with it.
That's right.
And so we can either do that tonight or we can do it at another time, but it's got to be done. I'm not comfortable passing or agreeing consensus to pass all 30 without being able to dig into it a little bit. But, I mean, we've got them before us, so if we wanted to jump in, or we can schedule a time, because this is something that looks like it's going to take a little bit more time. Now, what we will need to know is the questions I think Councilman Benavente brought up, a little bit more detail on how it's worked in the past before we look to carry it forward. So, I mean, I guess that's a question posed back to legal as to how quick you can turn that around and get it to us.
I can tell you right now. I mean, the most common ones are the code enforcement, the solid waste cases where you have, extreme debris, front and backyard, or a yard full of junk cars, things of that nature. If there are cases where, you know, someone has done construction on a building, whether it's complete construction or even demolition, and did not secure a permit, we take those quite often. Those are the main ones, because again, we really encourage compliance, and so this is like,
Well, Council, if you would consider, the ones that we know are ongoing and regular, if we could deal with those by consensus, just so we don't stop the process while we're working through the process. Those that pose a little bit more questions, like I had more questions about the noise ordinance, or after talking to law enforcement, some of the things that prevent them from being able to enforce it that may need to be updated, or things that, you know, may be a little too heavy-handed, you know, on the other end of that. But I think solid waste and the emergency order, building code things, because it's such a grave part of the everyday operation, you know, maybe you can consider just a partial adoption of those things so that we can keep forward. Because if I've heard Attorney Pulliam correct, until we do this, what happens with those solid waste violations or stop work orders? And
we can continue with the civil enforcement.
okay, not the criminal. All right,
sir.
I got you. Gotcha. All right, well,
Well, and one more question, because I'm hearing a lot of interest in doing something immediately, but if you could clarify, Attorney Pulliam, the session law that you've provided us said that if criminal penalties are possible, which are the ones in white, we cannot pass an ordinance at the first meeting which the ordinance is introduced. So we can't do anything if we wanted to right now.
Right, so tonight, so what would need to happen, so council would ideally say, okay, let's criminally prosecute Chapter 22 solid waste. Then we would need to go make that ordinance amendment, bring that back. That would be our first reading, and then we'd have a subsequent reading where we could adopt it.
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mayor Colvin, whenever.
okay, let's hear it.
Yes, let's hear.
Mayor Coleman, I move that we as a council request that our legal department return to us a hierarchy of ordinances that are most often prosecuted criminally, all the way down to the least prosecuted. And I think once we have that information, we can better ascertain which ones are the highest priority, like the building ones that we're prosecuting so regularly.
All right, there's a motion by Councilmember Benavente. Is there a second before I go to question?
I could live with that.
Seconded by Councilmember Hare. Question, Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a question, and it's just for clarification. If this motion passes, how long is it going to take for us to come back and approve it? And then I'm saying exactly what you said so I can make sure I've got it wrapped around my head right. So if we do not have that, then all this is kind of like up in the air. It will just be civil penalty, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So how long are we looking for what this motion is to come back to us?
Well, if I understand the motion correct, this is just a request for more information from the city attorney's office. So that's no action being taken by council. So
So it can, I guess my concern is that this could be opened end if we get it coming back, that we could be 6 months down the road and still be where we are right now.
We don't anticipate it would take 6 months, but it certainly will take us, I would say, several weeks to be able to get this information together for the council. Ideally, at this point, I would probably say we would be bringing it back to you at the February work session, since this would be the appropriate forum for discussion. Assuming council gave us some direction, then we would need 2 meetings. Typically, by the time you meet on Monday, the agenda for the following Monday is already processed. So we'd be talking probably March.
So we're talking anywhere from probably 3 months.
It's conceivable, but again, I want to stress that that doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything.
No, I understand that. I fully understand that, but I guess where my issue is on a lot of the things that we have, especially with environmental services, it takes us to go through the process to get to where we are long because by the law, we have to do certain things. And if you have a house that has trash in the front, has cars in the back or cars in the front, I mean, I got a phone call today that somebody has abandoned dogs in the back of their house and the whole front of the house has got trash in front of it. So, you know, the process in itself is a month to 2 months for us to even get started. Now we're kind of adding on other things. And I kind of have to say I'm agreeing with my colleague, Councilmember Thompson, is that, you know, we did read it, and so I've said enough. Okay, thank you.
Well, I just
Well,
have a question.
again, I
Mayor.
wanna-
I have a follow-up question, if I may.
All right, so I'm gonna come to you in a second. Just for clarification, you're still enforcing the civil portion. The criminal portion is what's in question. So for noise, 14-434 right now, for noise for property. So property owners, they're penalized $500 civilly. Where do you list what the criminal consequence will be? That would be helpful to me, that the ones that you only have a civil consequence or penalty, what the proposed criminal consequence would be.
So, Michael White, I'm the police attorney. For clarification purposes on the chart that you have, the ordinances that already have a criminal penalty within the ordinance are fine. They can still be enforced criminally. So as long as that, the ordinance already says a violation of this is a Class 3 misdemeanor, violation of General Statute 14-4, that can still be enforced criminally. So for example, firearms and weapons, which is discharging a firearm within city limits, that already says a violation of this ordinance is a Class 3 misdemeanor. That can still be enforced. You don't have to change it. You could choose to change it to be civil only, or you could just leave it criminally. That one does not need to be modified. So for the ordinance that are listed in the chart that already say a violation is a Class 3 misdemeanor, those don't have to be changed. They can continue to be enforced criminally.
And the ones that don't have that, like I just gave, the nuisance property ordinance that only has a civil penalty.
Correct. You would have to add in and amend that with the process that Ms. Pulliam outlined to be able to enforce that criminally. So if the ordinance does not already have a
I
criminal
got that,
enforcement-
attorney. So what I guess what I'm saying is, what is the criminal penalty proposed?
It would be a Class 3 misdemeanor.
Okay.
Yes.
So any of these that don't have the criminal statute listed would be automatically fall into a Class 3 misdemeanor.
Yes.
You would just have to add that into the ordinance.
All right, gotcha.
And if you don't state what the penalty is, then it's $50 or the $50 max fine or 30 days imprisonment or both.
Okay, all right.
Mayor
Council-
Colvin, as a point of order, I do know I have a motion on the
Yeah,
floor
you
that I
do.
wanted to get voted on. I'm also looking at the options listed in the legislative text, and I'd be prepared to make a second motion so that we actually take
what we
action.
have
But
to
we're
do,
still in discussion, 'cause I
Yeah,
have a
we're
question.
still in discussion phase. So I'm gonna go to Councilmember Thompson, Hondros, and then if there are no more questions, we'll vote this up or down and then propose the second one if needed.
sir.
All right, Councilmember Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, if we want to change the ordinance, when will it come back to us, and when will it come back to us a second time? That would take more than just March, wouldn't it?
No, because, again, assuming that we get the information to the council at the work session, at the February work session, then, and we receive direction from council, then we would expect that at your second meeting of the month, which is the fourth Monday, we would have it ready for the first reading, and then the second reading would occur at your second Monday of the month in March,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
assuming we get direction from council.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Hondros?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we had a lot of questions about if we change it, if we revise ordinance with a criminal penalty. Conversely, if we leave it as it is, or if we choose to not to enforce ordinances criminally and we just do the civil penalties, so where in that process is there teeth? In other words, the city issues an NOV, it doesn't get corrected, we penalize the offender, they don't pay. So walk us down that process.
The city has a collections process that it uses, and additionally, if the requirements are met, then the city has the ability to garnish state income taxes for the any unpaid money.
I think, Councilmember Hondros, to answer your question, that was the reason the environmental court was actually created, I think, in about 2003 or 2004, because that is exactly what was happening, which was we were assessing civil penalties. Many of those were $100 a day, or I think at the time may have been $50 a day. And the fact that a civil penalty was accruing did not seem to have the teeth, which is why the environmental court was created. But I will also stress to, and want to make sure that the council understands, that even when we take the cases to environmental court, oftentimes the judges give the persons an opportunity to try to abate the situation. Again, because we're seeking compliance. So I don't know that as we embark on this process, while it may be frustrating for individuals who are dealing with people who have overgrown lots and junked cars, but I don't necessarily know that the process is going to fundamentally slow down from what we are already utilizing.
All right. So, Council, if no more questions, we have a motion. Can you repeat the motion, Councilmember?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I ask that we move to receive more information related to the ordinances that are impacted by this general statute, see which ones we typically criminally enforce in a hierarchy from most likely to least likely. That way we can begin the process of picking which ones we want to make amendments to and criminally enforce.
All right, the motion by Councilmember Benavente, seconded by Councilmember Hare. We've had discussion. Those in favor of said motion, show of hands. To get on more for us? Okay. All right. Madam Clerk, motion carries. So, Madam
Colvin.
Attorney, can we put some specificity on the date?
Certainly.
We'll have this ready for the February work session.
The next motion I
Trying.
was going to make, sir, and hopefully this assuages some other concerns. Our legislative text asks us, I think option 2 is probably the middle ground here. So I'll ask that we move to criminally enforce only those ordinances currently allowed by law, like Attorney White had mentioned, and pay any collected monetary penalties to the county. So right now, as Attorney White mentioned, there are some that already come with criminal penalties. For those, let's go ahead and move that we criminally enforce those specific ones that are currently allowed by law and pay any collected monetary penalties to the county, which is the rule.
So continue would probably be the word we like better.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I move that we continue to criminally enforce only those ordinances currently allowed by law and pay any collected monetary penalties to the county.
And if make sure I'm understanding correctly, because I did hear you all, and with the motion, so any penalties that are received go directly to the county. That is a part of this motion also, right?
State
That's the
Constitution.
state law.
That's the current
State-
state law.
yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So as long as it's criminal enforcement, that fine or penalty has to go to the county school board.
Thank you.
All right, there's a motion by Councilmember Benavente, as stated, to continue the enforcement of those that have specific criminal portions described. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Hondros. Any discussion on that motion? All right, Council, look to you for your votes. All right, Madam Clerk, it's unanimous.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Item 4.03, Juan Valdez and
Good day, Mayor, City Council.
Seems like this is like a recurring dream. It seems like we've seen you up here about 3 or 4 times about this item.
Well, that's a good thing.
Not about the same item.
Taurus Freeman, Assistant Director of Economic and Community Development. Today I'm going to share with you the Shared Active Transportation Program. This is actually a City Council request from several months past. And before I get started, let me give you all a brief history of why we are here today. In 2018, the city was approached by 2 companies to do a shared biking program. The city declined to move forward at that time due to waiting for the completion of our bicycle and pedestrian plan. However, the Fayetteville State University decided to do a one-year pilot program. In 2021, the city was once again approached by those two companies to do the program again, and that's when you all directed staff to come up with a model ordinance as well as presenting information that we received from the Downtown Alliance as well as the Cool Springs District. So our shared active transportation program is one of the fastest growing means of transportation programs in the country. There are more than 100 types of micromobility systems in the United States today, and with an increase of ridership since 2016, it can be found in most major urbanized cities from coast to coast. Now, with that, you can also see a lot of those within our peer cities. You have Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, to name a few, that are currently doing the program. You also can find these on major universities, campuses such as UNC Chapel Hill and UNC Greensboro. Now, there are several types of vehicles used for micromobility. However, these are the two that we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the powered bicycle as well as the powered standing scooter. Now, before I get into our policies issues, just want to let you all know that under North Carolina Junior Statute, people can already ride electric scooters and electric standing scooters on our downtown streets. Our code does not allow them to ride them on the sidewalk, but they are allowed on our city streets. And that depends on the speed limit as well as the road classification. So with that, to allow them to be placed on the sidewalks, which is what you see when you see a lot of, in major cities, you see scooters and they have docking stations. With the city of Fayetteville, you have to have encroachment agreement. And before we get to our encroachment agreement, staff has identified several policy issues that are shown in the model ordinance that is in your packet today. One of the things we looked at was defined parameters of the scooters where they can be allowed. It is staff recommendation, if this to move forward, is to look at the footprint of our MSD, our municipal service area. Also, we want to look at the application process, the hours of operations, the enforcement and violations. Now, with a lot of, within the ordinance itself, the model ordinance, which can come back for you at a later date, staff will have additional meetings to iron out a lot of the details. I left a lot of blanks within the code, so allow us some flexibility so I can gauge on what other departments input, as well as looking at taking input from you all as a council. So the state of North Carolina Department of Transportation has an integrated mobility division that actually can assist with a lot of those details. So staff will definitely be able to converse with them and being able to come up with something that is suitable for our residents. So here we have some survey comments from our Downtown Alliance. As you can see, this is from their board of directors, where they were not in total agreement with having such a program. However, their interpretation is somewhat different from what is being proposed because we do not allow them on our sidewalks. A lot of the comments are geared towards that. Now, mind you, if the city moves forward, we can have requirements such as anyone under the age of 16 has a helmet, or, there'll be a geofencing, they have a manager on site. There are certain things we can put within the ordinance that could help curtail a lot of these concerns. Now, also in your packet, you have some responses from a Facebook survey that was conducted by our Cool Springs downtown district, and of the 11 responses, very few of those were actually positive. So tonight, staff is just asking direction in moving forward with an ordinance for our downtown, or to take no action.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freeman. It seemed like, again, when you first came up here, it seemed like this has been going on for a while. I didn't realize it was since 2018. I know before, one of the proposed vendors said that they typically want cities that have adopted a bike plan. We've adopted a bike plan.
That is correct.
As part of some of the bond, we've allowed additional bike lanes and other enhancements to execute sidewalk and connectivity. This is in a defined area. Put the list of cities up again that use this. A lot of them, a lot of our peers, surely we are comparable to that. Some of these communities have it. I know young people like it. It adds to the vibrancy, in my opinion, and I don't know if I would say that a Facebook post and 14 people's response is reflective on the bigger picture. So, I'm certainly appreciative of that, but I saw mixed comments in the Facebook post. Some were for it, some were not, which is with anything. You're not going to get 100% consensus, but I do know February 7th of 2022 was the last time you presented this. There was council consensus.
That is correct.
What's been going on the whole year in between this and now? Because we've lost a lot of vendors who had interest, and I think, that's...
Well, one of the requests from you all was for me to reach back out to those vendors. Those two vendors are still wanting to do business with the city of Fayetteville, and we've actually received a request from a local vendor that is wanting to do so as well within our downtown.
All right, so this will be, what, a bid process? How will the awarding go if council agrees to it?
Well, the process will be, if you all direct me to move forward, first would be the ordinance. Second will be possibly doing an RFP or an application process to select a vendor or vendors, depending on exactly what's stated within the code itself. And then from there, we do implementation, and staff will more than likely recommend that this would be a pilot program for 1 year. And then, therefore, we can come back after 6 months and give a staff report on exactly where we are in the process.
So final question before I go to Councilmember Jensen and Benavente. It won't take another year to get to the point of what you just described, will it?
No, sir, it will not.
All right. All right, Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. So, yes, we have been going through this since 2018, and my position hasn't really changed, but I am trying to budge a little bit because it is part of our downtown. So my question is, in Raleigh and Durham and Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Greenville, Charlotte, and Gastonia, are they all allowed on the sidewalks? Do we know the answer to that question?
Most are allowed on the sidewalks,
But not all?
but not all.
Okay. And so, and I'm assuming in Greensboro and at the colleges, they're allowed everywhere.
That is correct.
Which I totally get that. I am not going to vote for this, which I probably did in 2018, because I've been almost run over by these things being in other cities, bigger cities though. But I think, I'm just putting it out there, I do not think they belong on the sidewalks. That's my personal opinion, but I do think that we need to look at this and find a way to bring it to our downtown. So thank you for the answer to my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Benavente.
We're always talking about expanding our downtown, and this is a great way to do that. So at this time, Mayor Colvin, I move that we direct city staff to finalize a shared active transportation system within the city.
All right, and second by Councilmember McNair. Any further discussion? All right, look to you for consensus, council. Those in favor? All right, those opposed? Oh, it's 4. Okay, so it's unanimous. Okay. All right, Juan. I want to see you next February now.
Thank you, sir.
All right, item 4.04, rebranding. I see a lot of the formerly known as Millennial Council, Millennial Advisory. All right.
All right. Good evening, Council.
Evening.
I'm David Scott, Public Information Specialist. I'm the staff liaison to the Millennial Commission, and I'm going to introduce Mr. Malik Davis, and he's the chair, and Ms. Catherine Brown, who is co-chair.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. We are here on behalf of the Millennial Advisory Commission, wanting to rebrand the Millennial Advisory Commission. On October the 22nd, our commission in our strategic planning, we voted to change the name of the Millennial Advisory Commission. One of the reasons we wanted to change the name is because the term millennial limits the engagement of the younger citizens who fall outside of the millennial age group.
So the proposal of our new name, we approved it as a commission. That's why we're bringing it before you all today, to be called the Fayetteville Next Advisory Commission. This is just a concept of what the logo would look like. We're just coming before you all today to get an approval on the name specifically.
Our mission statement, we tweaked it just a little bit, but it's still with the goal in mind of the Fayetteville Next Advisory Commission is established to attract, retain, and engage Fayetteville residents between the ages of 19 and 39. The commission is dedicated to improving the quality of life for young adults through targeted event programming and community outreach initiatives by making Fayetteville a desirable place to live, work, and recreate for this generation.
Our goals. The Fayetteville Next Advisory Commission, we will continue to uphold the City Council's strategic goal number 4, make Fayetteville a desirable place to live, work, and recreate for the next generation, reach the target audience of 19 to 39 within the Fayetteville community, and perpetuate the strategies and goals of events and outreach to maximize the exposure of Fayetteville's assets and attributes to provoke engagement from our targeted audience.
So our next steps will be the rebranding campaign to introduce the Fayetteville Next Commission, solidify the proposed budget to adhere to the 2023 calendar of events, and execute marketing campaign to engage the target audience on our social media platforms.
So the council's options, 1 is to accept and approve the rebranding of the Fayetteville Millennial Advisory Commission, or 2, do not accept and do not approve the rebranding of the Fayetteville Millennial Advisory Commission.
All right, did have a couple questions and saw some head nods. It's catchy. In order to do rebranding, I know it takes money for you to actually brand in the first place. So I guess, will you come back with some type of budget proposal?
Yes, sir. We will come back with a budget proposal for the rebranding campaign.
All right. Councilmember McNair, and then Hondros, and then Benavente.
I just wanted to say I like the idea of rebranding the name because I think in this generation it would attract their attention more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hondros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, guys. I know you work very hard in that committee and commission. Thanks for all you do. I love it. I'm prepared to make a motion to accept it.
Well, I think Councilmember Jensen had
well, I'll second
threw
the
something at
motion.
me. All right. All right, Councilmember Benavente.
Mind heading back to the mission statement slide, if possible? Sure. When you guys talk about community outreach initiatives, what are some that you have in mind? And the reason I ask is because we know that young people in this age group that we're targeting are often 1 foot out the door when it comes to Fayetteville. We want to find ways to make Fayetteville a viable option for them to stick around in. And sometimes that includes talking about tough stuff. We're talking about lack of accessible childcare, low-wage work here in the area, them feeling like their degrees from FDCC, FSU, and Methodist aren't really, available here, the kind of careers that they want. Are you guys going to talk about the tough stuff when it comes to these community outreach initiatives?
Well, for one, we're going to stick to our goal, which is to create the environment. So once we create that environment by way of our events, we can then ask questions at our events. What do you feel? How do you feel about what council has going on? That's when we will deal with those issues. But we're not going to just have an event right now to deal with those personal issues.
Certainly. All things in due time. I just want to make sure that when this Millennial Commission was first started, I think for some people on council at the time, it was checking the box to say, hey, we're doing something for millennials in this community, whether or not anything substantive was actually happening. I think that you guys changing the name is a good second step, first one being growing the number of people in the group, but I think eventually the goal ought to be working on those tough issues. Don't let anyone here on council tell you can't talk about the tough issues that are facing young people in this community.
Thank you, sir.
Just before I go to Councilmember Jensen, I do need to address something now. This was kind of a brainchild of mine because of my own kids. So this was not a box check. This was how do I get my kids to come back home, which was the thought process behind it. And I'm still very passionate about that. And so improving and retaining people in this, when I called it millennial, that showed how out of touch I was in the first place. But it was also 5 or 6 years ago. And the birth date for millennials, if I understand it, from 81 to 90 something. So that does eliminate, half of the folks that you looked at. So it sounds great. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and so eloquently said. And yes, we've come a long way. So I would like to make a motion for the council to approve the name change to the Fayetteville Next Advisory Commission. Effective, I guess we'd have to wait for the meeting. So effective
So we'll
January.
authorize the change, and then what's
Yeah.
the process, Mr. Hewitt? Technical, logistical process.
I guess it would just be amending the charter. We can do that at your next meeting, just to change it on the
All right.
charter.
So there's a motion, thank you. There's a motion by Councilmember Jensen, second by Councilmember Andros to approve change. Any discussion? All right, council, look to you for your votes. Those in favor? All right, good
Mr.
luck.
Mayor, if I may, before they leave, I would like to know what the process is, or, now that the name has been changed, where we had talked about some money, getting the name out there. We, they are going to need promotional things to happen. Selling. They're going to need T-shirts and things like that. So. Yeah, outreach of going places because they are volunteering and showing themselves around town and around the city. So what could be the process for that we could?
Budget, we got the
Budget?
ink pen.
Yeah, well, I want to know when I can get the ink pen moving for them to start on getting, the Dogwood Festival is coming up in April. It takes time for things to happen.
How we would work would be to ask our staff liaison to work with them to develop a budget so that it has in it advertising, has in equipment, outreach, and all those elements. You may recall, some of you, that a couple of years ago we had all of your boards and commissions come before you to give a report, and it's been some time since we've done that. We have 24 other boards, 26 other boards, and this is a unique one. And so I think that based upon the feedback that we've received tonight, we would like to work with y'all to try to start bringing some of them back now that we're out of our COVID protocols, because I think a lot of the items that you've tasked them with also could be overlaid with some of the other boards and commissions, and it just hasn't been, we haven't seen them in here in some time. But the budget process would be to work with Mr. Scott to actually develop a budget, and I would hesitate to say a dollar number yet, because people work toward a budget number versus you have what you need once you identify what it is you need.
Yes, sir, and I know that they have done the
Yes,
budget and
absolutely.
have given it to them. I was just wondering what would be our next steps, because, the budget is passed by June. So I just wanted to know if there was
I'm so-
anything we could have that conversation maybe offline.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. And so if they have items that are in need of funding, they would work through Mr. Scott and we would get those funded. If there's an actual budget appropriation that needs to come back to council, we put that on an upcoming work session as a consent item. But understanding the interest and the need, they would just work with Mr. Scott to make that happen.
Perfect, thank you.
And if I can add, we do have the proposed budget for coming up the next year, so we're working on that now. We have that to the clerk's office shortly.
Councilman Thompson, you had something? Real quick.
Quick question, Mr. Mayor, since we were talking about budget and stuff, but in order for to do all that outreach and that material, you would need to, I guess, finish your logo. When will you be able to do that so you can put it on your outreach and all your material that you would probably need prior to the Dogwood Festival? Because I thought what you presented looked very nice.
Well, hopefully this gets voted on, so then we will work with the city on getting the logo finished.
Our next meeting.
All right.
That's the short
Sound-
answer.
And there is a budget now that we can use some of those funds to do the rebranding as of right now.
We have funds left.
All right. All right, well, thank y'all.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck. Fayetteville next. All right, item 4.05, this is another recurring item, shopping carts, it seems. Mr. Brook, how are you?
Doing well tonight. Mayor, how are you doing? Wrong one.
They're paying $39 an hour too.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. Brooke Redding, Special Projects Manager in the City Manager's Office, and tonight I'm here to present, following a request from Council, a report on errant shopping carts or blighted shopping carts in the city. As the Mayor spoke to it, and an ongoing theme tonight, this has been a project over the past 3 years that we've spoken about. And so for tonight's agenda, I'll provide a little bit of a background and history. I'll cover the research project we originally conducted. We'll cover the memorandum of agreement, the city processes that we established and where we're at now. I'll talk about the frequency and cost of the issue and some options for council, and then request direction from you. So just a real high-level timeline. Dating back to August 2019, Mayor Colvin requested that staff investigate or take a look at the issue of errant shopping carts in and around the city, causing issues with pedestrians and traffic and creating other hazards on the roadways and near it. In September 2019, I conducted a research project. We ultimately established a memorandum of agreement with the North Carolina Retail Merchant Association. Went through a couple years of following the process we implemented and put in place to track and manage these shopping cart issues. And then here we are following another council request to actually talk about kind of what happened, what we had done, where we're at now, and what next steps we could take to include identifying the cost and the impacts of collecting these carts across the city. So I'm not going to read the slide, but the main thing here is we conducted a 20-day research project. We had established 6 corridors in the city. We traversed those corridors multiple times a week. In that process, we identified over 143 errant carts in and around the city. You can see in that list there on the bottom left of the slide the cart vendors and who they were. Additionally, we had to cull through the fire's code data to find all the vendors in the city and identify who had shopping carts and who didn't. The main takeaway here was over 143 shopping carts were identified off of their premises, away from them, in residential areas and along thoroughfares in 20 days. So from there, council directed staff to enter a memorandum of agreement with the North Carolina Retail Merchant Association. We had several discussions with them. They helped broker that MOA with large box institutions like Walmart and other places here in the city. Everybody came to agreements, and council signed on in May 2020. There were several best practices. The city did all of the best practices that were listed on that MOA and confirmed that several of them had been conducted by the actual businesses themselves on their retailer best side. That MOA expired in April 2021, still at the height of the pandemic. When we adopted that MOA, we established an internal process using Fix-It, CityWorks, and several other of the staff departments to collect data. What we had figured out in 2019 is that we were picking these carts up and disposing them, returning them, whatever we were doing, but we weren't tracking that. So we put the system in place to track it. And so from that time in May 2020 to October 2022 this year, we've collected or encountered over 1,000 shopping carts across the city during the pandemic when nobody was doing anything, and into the now reopening of the entire economic center of Fayetteville. It's an exponential increase. As you can see here, we took the frequency and cost and tried to calculate that. So we took really the labor cost associated with it, the average per hour rate of the employees that are handling the shopping carts in and around the city, and then calculated that as 1 hour, and then figured out that it takes about 2 hours of staff work to identify, process, talk to the vendor, collect it, dispose of it, all the different variations that happen to these shopping carts in and around the city. And several of you have sent emails to city manager's office or had conversations with staff about this exact issue, so you're aware of the frequency of it. But using that simple cost model, which doesn't include all the other fringe pieces, it doesn't include the equipment needed, the disposal fees, it doesn't include that. We still calculated that since May 2020, we've spent over $78,000 picking up shopping carts. So while we had the presentation in 2019 that covered the research, we presented the MOA in 2020, council at that time was shown several different variations of ordinance types in lieu of an MOA. At that time, council chose the MOA, and here we are a few years later looking at now what other options we have. So just to reaffirm, there are currently no cities or counties in the state of North Carolina that have adopted an ordinance that creates rules for businesses to follow to prevent their shopping carts from being taken off their premises. There is a North Carolina general statute. It is a Class 3 misdemeanor, but I would venture to say that asking our police officers to enforce that when we're dealing with other levels of crime may not meet the right piece to it. Considering the type of community we live in and how many people actually use these things to move groceries back and forth between bus stops and other pieces, the options of a law or other format there may be more cost-effective for the city in the long run. So in the ordinance structure, while there isn't an example in the state, they really fall into three general pieces, which is that a retailer could have a plan to contain and collect errant shopping carts. That plan would be published, it would be recognized by the city, and they would operate under that plan. The city could impose fines and penalties for abandoned or errant shopping carts. Those are usually not effective. On the West Coast, you see that a lot, but they're not as effective as you would hope, because now you have an impoundment lot, you have a whole process where staff is just processing collected shopping carts. And then the third is a retailer has to have a system in place to contain shopping carts and prevent them from being abandoned. So like the things you see at Aldi where you put a quarter in, or when you go to Food Lion over here off Grove Street and it has a magnetic barrier that locks the wheels up, those are the types of devices. Or in a Dollar Tree where it's got the post that comes off the shopping cart and prevents it from leaving the doorway. As simple as that, all the way up to the magnetic side. But those are the types of ordinances that exist out in America that we could pull and show to council. So pending your questions, I'll pause here to answer those before I ask for direction
Do
from
have
council.
a couple. Got Councilmember Hare, and then I had a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the report. And yes, sir, we have been talking about this issue for some time, and it is a problem. It is a concern, regardless if other cities or not, don't have ordinances in place. Two questions. One is an ordinance to do the changes that you spoke of, the long bars, stop the wheels. I think I've had one that it wouldn't go out the door, the wheels locked out there at one of the stores, and they changed, they loosened it, they did what they did so that I could, because of so much that I had in the cart. Are you saying that we can produce an ordinance between you and our legal team to answer that we can enforce these stores to do some of those options?
I believe so, yes, but we would need to be directed from council to go and conduct that research, as there's a lengthy process. And it would have implications into future developments in terms of certificates of occupancy and other variations or other components that happen when you build a business. So there is a way to put those ordinances in place and then create an implementation plan, but we need time to actually go and have a better answer for you, sir.
So you don't have a strong, because it's like, the way I'm hearing this is that you get ready to go back to do some more research. I'm just kind of thinking that if you're going to make that type of proposal or it even be a part of your presentation, that you would already 100% know if we could enforce that ordinance on a business.
Yes, sir.
Am I
I misunderstood
understanding
your question.
correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So yes, we can put an ordinance like that in place. There aren't prohibitions in the general statute that would prohibit us from doing that, but there would be several secondary, tertiary, and quaternary effects from that type of ordinance, and it would need a much more thorough plan than the usual adopted ordinance.
Okay, so you open up something else. So then if we could produce that ordinance and dealing on what our judicial system out of Raleigh states, if I heard you correctly, that doesn't really, it's not really enforceable that we could do that. Is that what you just said?
No, we can put a law in place.
I mean, I know we can put the ordinance in place, but can we enforce that on the businesses to go and make this provision on those carts at their stores?
I need to come back with a
Yeah.
more definitive answer, but
Yeah,
from
yeah.
everything that we've spent time looking on this research, sir, I don't see any arrows that point any other way that we couldn't do that. But I hadn't had that question asked in that way unless the attorney or one of our members
Yeah,
has.
I would like to hear that. Seems like that's
I will
okay.
circle back and bring that back to you, sir.
Now, my other one question was, because I occasionally deal with Omni, where we have a lot of we take our scrap iron products, unused products of all different forms of metals and irons and copper. With that 78,000 I thought I saw on the screen of our cost for picking up, did we use that process? Did we use scrap iron? I mean, what did we do with the carts?
So the conglomerate of those carts were disposed in the normal disposal process used by the Solid Waste Division.
Which
I don't
is?
have any data that shows that we recuperated costs for those expenses. They would normally fall into the bulky tipping fees that happen with the Solid Waste Division.
Oh,
But they're
wow.
not recuperating those fees.
Oh, wow,
But I also,
okay.
just to clarify, sir,
Yeah.
of that 1,000 shopping carts, over half of them were returned to their original
Oh,
owners.
Okay, okay. Well, that was just another part that could be considered.
Yes, sir.
Instead of just using it and putting it, being a part of our tipping fee, going into the landfill. What's wrong with it being on the truck and just going across the scale at the scrap iron place and getting some revenue, whatever that amount is?
Absolutely,
All right.
sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, so Brooke, I appreciate the thoroughness of it. I'm like Councilmember Hare, I know we've researched it and you've done a great job with that. So if I recap this, so over 1,000 shopping carts been taken off of these streets, $78,000 since May of 2020, so roughly $3,000 to $4,000 a month in fees that we're picking up to do this. I know that the city has ordinances for drive-throughs to say you have to have a trash can there, just to discourage people from getting the food, eating it, and tossing it, right? So I know there are things we could put in place with the businesses to better the community. So if we look to amortize this or to give it an effective date, 2 years, 3 years from now, if there was an ordinance passed that said retailers in our community, of course, work with the chamber and economic development to try to be more of a friend and a foe, but say by a certain date, certain that you have to have carts that maintain that on your premises, and any new development that comes in, because they're coming in to make money. Communities do this, so they will factor that into the process. This is a good market for a store. They're going to come in and not go the other way because we've got a shopping cart ordinance. I mean, they're here to make money long term. So I think, Council, as we look at this, it's been going on a while. Maybe there's a date in the future that we say by this date, whether it's a year, 2 years from now, that we put this in to apply to future development and then to also allow current operators to do it. But at the same time, talk to that group through the chamber or through Robo's office. I know he has a relationship with big box retailers to bring those folks to the table.
So that would be the request tonight, Mayor, is looking for direction from council to pursue and conduct the research and bring back recommendations for an ordinance format and including its implementation plan. So not just the ordinance, but the full spectrum of how we would go from not having that ordinance in place to getting that ordinance in place, getting compliant businesses, and then having future businesses fall in that compliance model. So the ask tonight is really your direction. Do you want us to follow that pathway, spend the staff hours that are needed to figure that out, bring back something solid, and then create a generalized plan to work off of? Or do you want us to visit other ways or try to refine the process we're doing?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Got Councilmember Banks, McLaughlin, and Hondros.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions. First, I know you mentioned that we pick up those carts, and most of them were returned back to the customer, well, not the customers, but to the oh goodness, I couldn't get my words out. Yeah, so are they purchasing them back from us since we're the ones that's spending money picking them up?
No, ma'am. So our process, and just to bring that up, because I went over that slide fast, but our process is that it's identified on the street by Faye Fix-It or by a member of council or a resident. Somebody reports that to us through our work order system. We contact the vendor, our rapid team or the transit entity. They actually reach out to that vendor and say, hey, we've got this cart here. You need to come pick this up in the next 48 hours. If after 48 hours they don't pick it up, we can dispose of that cart. But often, our rapid team more especially, they'll pick it up and just drive it up the road back to where it's supposed to go and solve that problem as quickly as they can. And so while there isn't a way for us to hold accountability to the business, there's a way for us to expedite the issue and solve the problem, but ultimately, there's a cost associated to it.
Because I have a problem with that. I know over the years it's gotten worse. As we talk about in our earlier today as far as fining, we're fining residents and everyone else, but for some reason, we're not letting the individuals be accountable for their actions for those carts. I know it's unfortunate that the individuals that's removing those carts, more than likely, they're grocery shopping and they don't have transportation. So that's the unfortunate part. However, that shouldn't be the city's responsibility, especially, prime example, with Walmart. That's something that's constantly happening. I think that we should hold them accountable. We already know how much they're worth, Walmart is, and they should put something in place as far as having a person, hiring somebody to be a watch-out person. Because again, that shouldn't fall on the city. We have other things, other priorities we need to focus on, and not using our staff to go around the city picking up carts. So I hope in the future, because this has kind of been going back and forth. I hope that we can hold them accountable, whether we charge them to pick up those carts or something, or just like he mentioned at Ross, as soon as you can't even go out the door without the cart. But again, that's unfortunate for the individuals that shop and have to carry those bags to the car. But that's something that we should definitely look into.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilmember Hondros, and then Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's definitely a pickle. Question for you, Mr. Redding. So if I remember or heard right in your report, we had a memorandum of agreement with the State Association of Retailers?
The North Carolina Retail Merchant Association.
And that expired around April of 2021?
Yes, sir.
So I'm just thinking, rather than, obviously, we can make an ordinance or a policy, but then we have staff that has to enforce, or someone's going to have to enforce that. Can we not go back to the association and see if we can get a new agreement?
We could do that if that's council's wish, but I would orient you to that model that I showed in the data. The pandemic happened about the same time we adopted that, so it's kind of hard to see the true effects for it. But the city did spend close to $10,000 putting signs up, creating new processes. We expanded Faye Fix-It, literally in the digital environment. We connected our CityWorks service to all that. So we spent some time and resource just to be able to track and manage the sheer collection and recovery of those carts. But again, if council's wishes to enter another MOA and try that for another amount of time, we now have a model that will measure that data and continue to calculate the cost we're spending while we work out another MOA if we don't want to follow an ordinance path.
And then last question, so no other peer city in North Carolina has an ordinance for shopping carts?
Not at this time. Greensboro has been in discussions for several months.
But if we
I don't know
expand
their
outside
outcomes.
of North Carolina, I'm sure there's a municipality somewhere that probably.
Absolutely, sir. The second you go to the Midwest and West, almost every major municipality has some form of an ordinance that prevents carts from being removed from the premise and requires a device on it to stop it.
But it is a North Carolina general statute that it's not supposed to be removed, right?
It is, but that law applies to the individual removing the cart, not to the business, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Thompson.
Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion. Well, I motion that we direct staff to develop an ordinance recommended to address the errant shopping carts.
All right, motion by Councilmember Thompson, second by Mayor, Councilmember McNair. Any discussion on the motion? All right, council, I look to you for your votes. Those in favor? Okay, wait, hands, y'all, because I see them sporadically. Those in favor? All right. Those voting opposed? Councilmember Hondros, okay. So, motion carries. All right, thank you. Item 4.06 is the added proposal at the beginning of the meeting. Council, it's a conflicted date of training, from what I understand, for our upcoming council meeting on the 23rd. And so there were at least 4 or 5 council members that had to travel that would not make it back for the meeting. So the proposed date, if that meets everybody's interest, would be that Thursday,
26th.
which is the 26th. And so we need formal action, need to suspend the rules. First, a motion to suspend the rules and then to change the date.
Mayor Colvin, I move that we suspend the rules.
All right, it's a motion to suspend the rules, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Dawkins. Discussion on the motion, Councilmember Thompson? No. Oh, you voting? All right, those in favor? All right. Rules suspended, all right.
Mayor Colvin, I ask that we reschedule our January 23rd regular council meeting to January the 26th, a Thursday.
All right, there's a motion to reschedule from the 23rd to the 26th. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember McNair. Discussion on the motion? Those in favor? All right, meeting rescheduled. A motion to adjourn?
Motion we adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Y'all have a good evening.